what I was interested in exploring is how are cities depicted in films,
Okay.
and more importantly, what makes a good city and what makes it livable. So they are very two different ideas,
There are two different ideas. They're two very broad ideas.
right?
You know, to me particularly, because both interest me a lot. Films, I'm like a film enthusiast. I watch a lot of films, and the only thing that I'm looking for in films is how the space is depicted in it. Because I come from an architectural background. So, the moment you said films and city, there are so many references that instantly pop up in my head. And actually, I want to show them to you. But for the brevity of this conversation, let's put that aside.
So-
And one more thing. When you say what makes a city livable, it is still a little broad topic. So you please help me out and slightly narrow it down.
Right. So okay, I'll tell you how this idea came to be. The first thing is, as I said, Slumdog Millionaire depicts the city in a fairly negative light. Right, Mumbai is depicted in a negative way. At least I felt like that when I was watching it. In The Wire, there is an almost impartial tone that they take towards the city. So you don't judge the city. You don't, even though there's a lot of evil, there's a lot of crime, pollution, disease. You don't look at the city negatively. It's almost as if you take a sympathetic tone towards the city. You can understand its problems. You can understand why it is like that. So you stop judging it.
Okay.
And then obviously a great example of a positive depiction of a city is in Midnight in Paris, in the Woody Allen film. It's almost magical. The city is a magical, it's a living organism, and it's got these layers, and it straddles between two time zones. So it's got a lot of interesting elements. So, cities are depicted in various ways, and probably in order to narrow the question down then, because it seems like they're two very broad questions.
Have you seen Zootopia?
Yeah.
I know it's animated and slightly, childlike, but I really enjoyed the depiction of the city in that.
Mm-hmm.
It shows so many different facets of a city, from a really heavy urban life which is moving at fast pace, to depictions of the ones in nature, to the depictions when you are a small human being and the entire space changes. So yeah, anyway, you were saying something.
So, if I were to just take this thought a little further, one thing that we've all seen is those shots of the palm trees in LA, on Hollywood Boulevard. There's a guy driving and you see those palm trees on the side. But the truth is, a lot of our cities are in flux. So, we may see a future where those palm trees don't exist and are replaced by something else. And the reason is, California has seen a severe drought. It's one of the few places in the US which does not have water in adequate quantity. And so they're planning to replace those palm trees with drought resistant flora.
Okay.
And so it's very likely that in the near future we may not see palm trees in our movies which are depicted in LA. We might see something else. So the way movies capture a city is actually a great way of capturing or mapping out the evolution of cities. And so you could look at a movie from say 1950s and get a sense of New York that you would otherwise not get.
Yeah.
And so in a way, movies then become historical evidence.
Historical windows. No. I like to slightly differ over here, because see, at the end, even if they make it really believable, really close to what it was, it's just a mere depiction. It's reflecting what it was, and it's a recreation.
Right.
Okay, they're looking back at history. I'm not very familiar with what the process is like, but if I were to assume, they'd probably take a city of 1950s. They'd go through a lot of research, literature, old photographs maybe, and try to pick out visual styles that they can articulate through words, explain to the team, get more such products and images together to build a recreation
The way
of
they
sorts.
see it, right?
The way they see it.
It's their perspective.
And yeah, but to call it historical evidence would be a bit, it's
No, I'm not saying it's objective historical evidence. It is a fairly subjective historical evidence of what a city was.
Yeah, it's
But-
more like a window into
So this
someone
brings
else's
me-
imagination.
Exactly. So I want to ask you this question now,
Yeah.
which is, how do you view a city? What's the subjective mental model that you use to view a city? What is the first thing you notice? What would an ideal city be for you? What are the factors that you consider paramount? How do you go about judging a city if you assess a city?
Generally it depends
Yeah.
from experience to experience.
Mhm.
If I'm in the city for a longer period of time, the judgments will of course vary and it will become thick and much more analytical. If I'm for a shorter period of time, then I'm pretty much in a receptive mood, so I'm just
You just
again my
consuming-
judgments are formed likewise. So if I were to give you both sides of the coin, tell you both sides of the story, I lived in Mumbai for 6 months. So that was a longer period of time. I was working there, I was living like a citizen. But other cities that I've visited, let's say Alleppey, Kochi, Kodaikanal, Bangalore, these cities I've visited for short durations.
Mhm.
So the instant is, I'm more like a tourist over there, first of all. And the first things that I quickly begin to notice is the walkability. When you're walking in the
Mhm.
city,
That's
out on the streets, and what is the temperature like? What are the senses telling you? How are you feeling? Are you feeling
Mhm.
positive towards the day? It's depends on the people as well. If are people more, are they friendly towards you? Are they indifferent towards you? Those things start forming. Then colors, trees come into the picture. Scale comes into the picture.
Mhm.
The kind of neighborhood. Now imagine walking on a Bangalore street which is covered with trees, and there's like dry leaves on the floor and not much traffic. And in the same Bangalore you can experience with huge scales and big buildings, and at the same time there's not much trees and there's too much traffic on the road. But the weather is the same everywhere. So there are those multiple layers through which you experience a city. That's one to begin with. For a city like Mumbai, in which you live for a long period of time, your association with the city starts becoming more because of the people, the places, and the memories that you have over there, rather than what the city in general stands for.
Do you think then, this is just a very random question, but do you think then that these objective parameters of judging a city, things like pollution and livability indexes, do you think that ultimately it doesn't matter because subjective experiences will always differ, and that you can always have a great experience in a terrible city?
Yes. That's
So-
a very interesting point. And this is exactly what I was getting at. Even though we have subjective experience of the city, okay, majority of the times they're determined by those objective parameters.
Right.
An extremely rainy day in Bombay will determine the subjective experiences that we have in terms of the memories that we build upon, in terms of the association that I have with the places. What I'm trying to say is that a rainy day is enjoyed by a lot of people, and at the same time it's detested by a lot of people in the same city. And I'm targeting the rainy day because it leads to several other repercussions. The city closes down, people
There's
ask for
traffic
leaves,
jams.
there's traffic jams, so it puts into order, it rolls down the ball, it creates a snowball effect of various experiences
True.
that people will have throughout the forthcoming days.
Right.
If a flood hits a city, let's say, this happens majorly and this covers all the citizens. But then it again begins to vary when, let's say, there is traffic jam in a particular part of the city, as opposed to there's a bad gutter line and bad infrastructure of the drainage in another part of the city. Those are micro level experience creators, let's call them that, for that particular locality or neighborhood.
Right. So I understand what you're saying.
So I think they're very interlinked.
Right. No,
Both.
I don't disagree with you, but I also feel like the way I look at a city is very different. Because in your case, you look at your sensorial experience, right? I look at it, and this is something I've actually thought of, and I've listed down, which is that I only look at three things. The first is simply the visuals, just the aesthetics, and that's probably because I have an untrained eye.
No.
But it's just the first thing I notice is the way the city looks. So when I look at a New York skyline, I'm in awe. Regardless of how many open sewers and rats there may be in Manhattan, I'm in awe of that, the bigness of it. And the reason I say this is because ultimately cities are hubs for creativity and innovation and growth. But they're also hubs for negative things which I simply overlook. Things like crime, pollution, ill health. So, the way I look at cities is obviously the preliminary thing is the way it looks.
The
aesthetic,
visuals
the
of
visuals.
it. Which is again a little sensorial. If you...
Yeah, but it's not... It's not...
Your scales are different.
Yeah, and the thing is, it has a lot to do with, a sensorial experience would have more than one sense. Like you would ideally look at something, listen to how the city... But for me, it's purely visual. Maybe because I have, I'm inclined towards using my ability to see more. I learn more when I see things instead of listening to them. So, and the other thing, just to add a quick point here, which is that the other thing I look at is the way land is used. So
Okay.
I love the idea of having discontinuity. So to have a skyscraper next to a park, a flat land is something I really like to see. And then finally, the way the city molds social experiences. So for instance, a very quick example is, in Ahmedabad, when we have the sitting arrangement outside Ahmedabadni Gufa. That sort of an experience I find very intriguing.
Very organic and
Very organic.
It's not monotonous. Like for instance, the exact opposite would be riverfront. You
Right.
sit anywhere on the riverfront, it feels exactly
Really
the
the
same.
same.
Whether you're near the NID patch or whether you're near the Sabarmati patch.
Right.
But yeah, that's amazing that the
So-
possibility of a city to generate a variety of experiences.
And stems from the fact that do you think that it has to do with how organic the city is?
The growth of the city.
The growth of the city is.
It does. In many cases it does. Because the more organic the growth is, the less interference of people. Or let's say less interference of one particular kind of people. The more mix and match and variety and diversity will come into play. And that gives a variety of experience that we are talking about.
So
I would recall this one another debate that we had. So I recall this one experience, one debate that we are having last Sunday, Sky City.
right.
We were talking about the exact same thing, that when one person comes into place and designs, like one urban planner, one architect, one designer come together to form a particular product, it becomes slightly an egocentric way of approaching it, that because there's a lot of imposition of that one person controlling that entire process of designing. As opposed to that, if there is a participatory design, let's say the pole houses in Ahmedabad, where each pole house is designed by a different person and a lot of their cultural characteristics come into play in the selection of the window or the way they arrange their entire household. So each house becomes different, each product becomes different, associations become different, and the variety is then hence generated, is all I'm saying.
Right. So for those who don't know Sky City is a township
Of sorts
on the outskirts of Ahmedabad.
outskirts of Ahmedabad.
So
Very neatly and organized and
very manufactured.
very manufactured
It seems very
for the
manufactured.
elitist.
Yeah. This talk about organic development is very interesting. Also for something else, which is that initially. So if you look at how cities developed historically, cities developed because people wanted economies of scale.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's about economies of scale in not just wealth creation or housing, but in a host of things. For instance, if you have an apartment complex, it's a very efficient way of housing a lot of people together, and it increases productivity and social spontaneity. You can come across a lot of people, etc.
Yeah.
And so cities grew from that. If we go way back, then obviously cities grew because people just had to be close to each other to do the big things required for civilization. Grow more plants and have more cows and get more resources. And slowly we see development towards a planned way of living and planned cities.
Yeah.
And so an interesting point here is, and I would like to again talk about a show which is Narcos.
Yeah.
So in the first season of Narcos, Pablo Escobar is shown to be a drug lord from Medellin, right, the city in Colombia. And it's very interesting to me because I actually went back and looked at the way the city has developed. So in the 1990s, the city saw a huge growth spurt in terms of crime and guerrilla warfare, etc. The city was pretty much ravaged because of it. And the way the city is designed is that it's a city, obviously geographically it's on the Andes, which is a mountain range in South America.
Yes.
And
I have a very interesting example to add, but go on.
yeah, so it's a city, so it's on a hilltop essentially, and most people in the city live in what are known as comunas, which are the Colombian equivalent of a favela. A sort of slum, an aggregation of shanty towns.
Yeah. Like ghettos, you mean? Are they particularly of the same community in terms of their race?
Exactly. So they tend to be huge areas of slums belonging to one community.
One community, not so sophisticated.
But what's interesting is that they decided that they wanted to get out of this rut, this developmental rut. And so they came out with ideas of countering it. And so again, so all of this communas developed because it was an organic development. But now we see not just that, but we also see like this development which is planned, right? And an interesting thing that they've done is that they've connected the elite or the so-called good areas of the city with the so-called comunas, the bad ideas of the bad areas.
The unsophisticated infrastructure of the
exactly,
city, let's call it
through cable cars. And what this has done is, this has allowed people from the nicer areas to come to the so-called bad areas and become invested, because earlier they had no way of going inside these areas, but now they can look at them, go and visit these areas, and this has spurred development. And so I find this very, very interesting, because this is, I think, the ideal way of developing cities, which is that you have an organic base and then you sort of structure that base a little more proactively. You have planned development around it.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a great way of looking at cities. And I'll just quickly add a point here, which is that something that the person responsible for the development, the city's developer said, which is that a good building, a well-designed space, a dignified public transit system, a quality cultural event, these work on a psychological level to generate a feeling that you are included in the city. And this was said by Alejandro Echeverry, who is the manager responsible for the development of the city. Anyway, sorry.
What you just explained right now is one of the recent and the trendiest examples in the academia. And this is also what we are taught, and the name that you mentioned, and all of the things about, what is the name of the town? I keep forgetting.
Medellin.
Yeah. And anyway, Yeah, you've summed it up very nicely and all of the things. So, which raises one of the questions that I've been trying to ask even myself and a lot of other people in the urban planning department, that is it really necessary for a particular person to design an entire city? You know, the whole argument of Robert Moses versus Jane Jacobs.
I have no idea.
So Robert Moses there's a book called Power Broker, which is a biography of that person, and Robert Moses was responsible for developing and shaping a lot of the New York that we see today. You know, he was a major role, and it seemed at one point he was even more powerful than the president of the country. He was a ruthless person and a workaholic and a really powerful person in the Robert Greene sense. As opposed to that, a lot of protests took place, and the leading protester was Jane Jacobs, who was arguing against Robert Moses that cities should not be developed as a single-handed one-person job, that one person cannot rule down a couple of buildings and shape. You know, every community, wherever they are, they should do their bit with little bit of principles, that you shape your sidewalks a particular way, you shape your streets a particular way, and hence a lot of communities can, at a micro level, in a very fractured sense,
they can sort of emerge,
emerge their own little cities, which come together, become the wholesome experience of the entire city, which is again diverse and organic in one sense. Again, referring back to the city that you were talking about,
Medellin,
which was about these communas,
right?
You know, developing their own space, as opposed to the Robert Moses approach, which is like one person is in charge, the city planner per se, who develops the entire city.
And I think the last thing I want to add to this discussion is something that I came across, which I found very interesting, which is that not all cities develop because of functional needs or even aesthetic needs. That's the way we look at cities, but it's not.
It's not the case. It's not the case. I think it's a lot of it is because of survival needs.
Right.
It all boils down to that.
Yeah,
so ancient ones and even the modern
But I would think survival needs are part of functional needs.
They become part of functional needs.
What I'm talking about is something a little different. So the way I look at it is, if you look at the city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia, it's known for the Hajj, right? The pilgrimage that Muslims take, that they go on. What's interesting about the city is that they've had to develop that city to ensure that every year more than 3 million or so pilgrims can pass through it and go for their pilgrimage. That's a lot of stress and pressure on the city. And so we've seen the development of Mecca, but the development has to be regulated on very strict religious lines and cultural lines. You can't just have modern development. It has to be regulated within the confines of what is permitted in Islam. And so we see some amazing new things. You know, they've now used semi-air conditioned Teflon treated tents. They use material which is not flammable to make those tents because there was an incident. So we see this sort of regulated development but very innovative development. And one thing that I found extremely interesting, which was that, you know, when these pilgrims go on their journey, they generate every day about 600 tons of waste, right? And in order to deal with the waste, they've created pneumatic pipes which collect waste from 40 different locations and send it to a hub from which it is then sent to landfills. Okay. But in order to do this, they've had to develop these pneumatic tubes which take the trash at an astonishing speed. The way they've developed these systems is also very interesting because they've merged what I consider a more structured, innovative, modern approach with what already exists, which is the ancient city of Mecca of great religious importance. But so I guess this is a good note to end this conversation on. Any parting thoughts?
Nothing. I was just trying to connect it back to the earlier argument. That infrastructure is something I don't know. I mean, none of these examples come to my mind where infrastructure, in the sense of drainage, in the sense of commute, in the sense of
public utility
public utilities being developed by communities, you know, on a more fractured level. You can't, because you need a centralized system for that.
So I guess that's what we can agree on. You need a
It's the other thing could
top-down approach for cities.
It could be a top-down approach, but if you were to have a bottom-up approach for that,
I think what we're getting at is that, and I think this goes also back to something that I spoke about, which is organic and then planned development, which is that you need a bottom-up and the top-down in as complements to each other. I don't think anything singularly can work. Because there are positives and negatives too. But anyway, this has been a good conversation.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think one part that we forgot to talk about, which could become part of the
coming podcast.
Coming podcast could be films and cities. I think we missed out on going a little deeper into it.
Yeah, no. I wanted to just talk about Medellin because it was the Narcos. And I found the city extremely stressed and very sad because of whatever had happened. But it's good to see it coming back to life. Anyway, this has been a good talk.
Yeah.
See you and bye bye.